Hi, everyone. We are going to be talking about Chapter 10 today, the final chapter in Mill's text, all about evaluating action research. So this chapter brings everything together and leaves you with a set of criteria that you can use to evaluate not only your action research, but a peer's or other action research that you may encounter, and leaves you with some reflection that can help strengthen your current project and future projects. So, of course, Mills leaves us with this quote that I really liked, thinking about how when you evaluate action research, that really shows our mastery of all purpose to the and the how action moving out. Um, the start of the chapter goes through just a little bit of course, there's the case study. So I'm not going to talk too much about the case study today, but there is another case study in there for you to look at another example of what a written report would look like. So after the case study, Mills talks about the criteria for evaluating educational research and then action research specifically. And so over here on the left, I have kind of some of the things that reviewers or scholars look for when evaluating educational research. So looking for a clear defined research problem, a rigorous methodology, whether it be quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, philosophical, the measures that the researchers took to ensure reliability and validity, detailed data collection, a clear and just a clear description of the process there, as well as how data were analyzed and the instruments that they used. Of course, ethical standards, keeping that throughout and making sure that that is interrogated throughout. Now for action research, so you can see here there are some parallels, but specifically to what we've been looking at, a really defined area of focus. So in broader educational research, you have your problem statement that is because the purpose might be to find findings that can be generalized to other populations. It's a bit more of a broad problem, whereas the area of focus in action research is directly related to what the practitioner, their locus of control, what they are doing, their teaching and learning that they are able to impact. Research questions, making sure that they are practical, answerable, and again, within the teacher's locus of control. That's something that we'll talk about later and in this chapter as well. This is just really important in action research because the whole point is to improve your teaching and learning that you have control over. Reflective stance, making sure that this attitude, this inquiry as stance, this immediate application, what they did once they collected and analyzed those data. Ethical considerations, just like in general educational research, in action research, it is sometimes harder because you're so familiar with students using their names and talking about them. Within the classroom, that you have to really make sure that you are putting on your ethical stance to protect their privacy, action-oriented, and then having this connection between the data and the action that you chose to show how the actions are data-driven. So you can see here that because just like we learned in chapter 1, the purpose of general education research is different from action research. there are going to be different criteria. So of course, action research is focused on practical and immediate application for that teacher. Continuous improvement, this cycle. Okay, so it is criteria that includes in there. This is the checklist 10.1 through criteria and use. And then the way that Mills sets up the chapter is after going through this, he applies it to the case study example. So area of focus, is it focused on teaching and learning? One thing that I would add on there is, does the action research explain why the educator chose that area of focus? Again, we talked about this in writing up the research report, contextualizing. How did you come to this topic? Why? What happened? Paint the scene for me, for us, so we know, we can understand, get a peek into your point of view as to why you chose that area of focus. So we spent a lot of time in chapter 3 going through the reconnaissance process, making sure that that researcher is demonstrating their reflective stance there, even in the introduction when they discuss their area of focus. So an example, making sure that it is focused on an instructional strategy versus just an overall educational trend that could be applied to greater populations, or might be specific within resource. And add on here with area of focus. Are the research questions phrased in a way that are possible to collect data on, but are they framed in a way that answer what it is that you are hoping to understand, going back to what we learned in chapter 6 with validity. So making sure that the research questions are structured in a way that you're really honing in on the issue in your classroom that you're most interested in. So examples, clear and narrow, like how does peer discussion impact student engagement in science versus something more unfocused or broader. Locus of control, this is something that again is underpinning all of this, but is it something that the teacher has control over? Is it something that they actually can have an impact on? Again, it can be so easy to focus on the things that are outside of our control, but there's so many things within our control. And that is what the action research should be about, because it's something you can actually change and impact. Data collection are the appropriate, again, a question with your area of focus, what you want to know. Chapter, there's also, I didn't include those here. Some data tables for those. Ethics. So coming back to ethical standards, this is something that in your written report that you can be very explicit about the measures that you took to protect students' privacy. And sometimes you can even use it as a note as to why you didn't include something. You might describe a student artifact, but not include a picture because perhaps the student is in it, or it has some type of identifiable information. So there's some good examples in the chapter about how to make visible the ethical principles that were included in the study. And then finally, reflective stance. Does the reflection demonstrate growth or change in understanding, teaching, and learning? So this reflective stance should be evident throughout. So in my view, you have to have a reflective stance to even come up with a strong area of focus, because you have to engage in the reconnaissance process and look back at the context of your classroom. How's it going to identify an area? Also really when you're planning the study, but your interpretation when you make meaning of what those numbers mean with the stance of taking action. So it will be evident in your interpretation and then also in your action plan section when you tie what you learned from the data you collected and analyzed to the action that you implemented because of it. So this cause and effect cycle. So of course, the action research is a cycle, but then also the data analysis and interpretation to action is also a cycle as well. So making sure that that is quite visible in there. You're talking about what you learned and what you changed because of the research. Okay, and then of course, action. Okay, so here is what the table looks like here. I talked about this kind of got cut off, my apologies, but action, do the outcomes of the study lead to action? And the action data collection, how is the action connected to a finding? Okay, so area of focus, again, making sure that it is a need on you. And when you are thinking about writing about your area of focus, you can think about formulating it as like an elevator speech, like 1 to 2 sentences that summarize your focus. You can feel free to put that in the chat if you want to practice. And then also maybe trace it to your area of focus. If you are thinking visually, a diagram, maybe it's your schedule of your day or a lesson plan, thinking about how your area of focus directly impacts aspects of your current teaching and learning and just where that's located. So research questions, talked a little bit about that, must be directly answerable, like the skill set, time, and available resources. I know time is such a challenge, as are resources. So the good questions are things that you can collect data to answer and that position the relationship between your variables. So your intervention and the outcome that you are hoping. So some examples: inquiry-based methods impacts understanding, improve students' writing quality. That we talk is questions likely shift or rise in nature. So I am curious, or changed over the semester. Okay, locus of control. So making sure that you can apply what you are finding and carry out what you can find. So when you are looking at this, thinking about, and it might be helpful too to take out your schedule, your plan, map of your day, to think about the areas that you can impact, or maybe to, and you might explain this in another way too, but having like a T-chart, things that are in your control right now, things that are not, to talk about that as you discuss that. But that's something to look for too when evaluating the quality of action research. So data collection, choosing appropriate methods. So the data collection techniques, like they might be quantitative or qualitative. Here are examples of both, and making sure that they're aligned with the research questions. We did a lot of work with our triangulation matrix about that. And again, there are some examples here. And then mapping those to your research question, and then even your findings when you are discussing your findings, in your data analysis and in your data interpretation, referring back to the data collection, the data sources that you use to come up with those findings can be helpful. And there's some good visuals in this chapter about how to do that as well. Oh, another thing I wanted to talk a little bit about too is the ethics and action research. So things to mention and that you should be looking for in high quality action research is, did the researcher mention how they protected student privacy, how they kept student information confidential. Did they obtain informed consent, or did they notify students? How did they do that? And what did they do to ensure no harm? Okay, so this is a really important concept in the chapter, is this reflective stance, growth through reflection, the iterative nature of notice, take action, collect data, reflect, analyze, continue, as you are continuously going through this ongoing. Profession, analyzing, but um, have that meaningful change. So I am curious, I know a lot of you have been engaged in reflection since really the first chapter, and has really made it an intentional part, or come back to it. Many of you said that reflection is something that you have done a lot previously, or you continue to do, and some people have come back to it, some people have started it. So through the reflection that you've done over the semester, have there been, what elements of your reflection has surprised you the most about the process that you have done so far? And then, of course, the whole purpose is the taking action based on research findings. So many of you I know are already taking action. So please share the actions that you might already be taking based on some of the findings that you found. Of course, making sure that when in that written report, when you're evaluating, you're looking for the connection between the data and the action that was taken or proposed. Okay, so of course, you can take this checklist in chapter 10 to apply to your own research. So based on that, is you are posing it the most challenge for you? And maybe we can help each other. Okay, and so the end of this chapter ends with a brief discussion of collaborative action research, and how action research and a practice of action research can have the potential to lead to school-wide change. So the impact can be beyond just an individual classroom. I know a lot of you have mentioned already sharing or planning to share with your teams or members of your school community. So that's one way that you can have a greater impact with your action research. So please share how you are planning to share your results, or if you already have. And then sometimes that can inspire another research project or a collaboration. Everyone now is doing an individual action research project, but there is collaborative action research projects where groups of educators work together to implement action research. It can help professionalize teachers. It can help you learn about you might want to how practice to inspire broader change. Please leave. Okay, so lastly, thinking about how you might embed this into your professional practice. So I would love to know what your future plans are for if and how you plan to include action research in your future practice after we finish the semester and finish the chat. And if you have any goals for both action research or the next academic year, and how you envision yourself achieving it. So this chapter should leave you with kind of a final overview of the key, most important aspects of action research, and a checklist that you can use to go back and look at your project and see the strengths of it and areas that you might be able to improve.